Hi, folks. Welcome back. I'm your instructor, your professor, Professor Abundesguerra, Professor Abundes. Again, whatever you want to call me, I'll respond to. With that said, here we are with our recorded lecture for week one. And this one, we're going to be in these slides. We're eventually going to be talking about Rachel's, but we'll leave off the Rachel's for the next slide. In fact, for this recorded lecture, we're mostly going to be talking about the Metcalf piece, which is just going to sort of introduce you to what philosophy is if you've never taken a philosophy course or you've never really heard anyone explain or talk to you about philosophy. And that's what we're gonna do. With that said, let me go ahead and start up this slideshow. Give me 1 second. Okay. So there is my contact information. Go ahead and take that down for yourself if you want to. All of these slides will begin with an outline to sort of tell you what it is that you're going to be expecting in the slides. We'll talk about what philosophy sort of even is at the beginning. After that, again, we're going to leave that off to the next recorded lecture. We're going to talk about the challenge of cultural relativism. He's going to argue, again, we're going to see this in the next lecture, why we might want to accept cultural relativism, what might be attractive about it, but he's ultimately going to say that we should reject it. So, spoiler, the reason he says that we should reject it is because it leads to really bad consequences, particularly where we can't criticize other cultures and their arguably bad and immoral practices, but also we can't even criticize ourselves and try to improve our own culture. And there will be a takeaway for this course as well. There's a reason I chose that reading as one of the first readings for the course, put it that way. So, what is philosophy? So, there is a joke, right? That if you ask two philosophers for their opinion, you'll get three opinions or three different perspectives. And the reason for that is because philosophers argue a lot. They disagree a lot, and that's okay. Even the definition of philosophy itself is controversial, which is not something that you see in a lot of other fields, for instance. Still, let me try to give you something basic to latch onto right now. So the most general definition of philosophy is that it is the pursuit of wisdom, truth, and knowledge. Sometimes it's even truth with a capital T, which means that it's a very special kind of absolute objective truth that persists throughout time. Indeed, the word philosophy itself means love of wisdom in Greek. Note that this is coming from the Metcalf. So obviously, at the end of the course, you'll be able to come up with your own definition, hopefully, of what philosophy is to you and what it means to you. But for now, you can say that the love of wisdom, and it's the study of sort of fundamental truths, whatever that might mean to you. So another thing to note, right, is that there are a lot of subfields in philosophy. So there's going to be a general introduction, and we're going to be touching up on some of those subfields, but we're not going to touch on all of them themselves. We're going to touch on the ones that not only I find the most interesting, but what I think are some of the bigger subfields in philosophy. So, for instance, logic. Logic is its own course. We're not going to do logic in this class. But logicians study good and bad arguments and reasoning, and they study formal symbolic languages intended to express propositions, sentences, or arguments. If you do take a logic class, you'll find that it's almost very similar to, for instance, coding. So it's a very different type of philosophy. Metaphysics, well, we are going to study a little metaphysics in this class. Metaphysicians, people who do metaphysics, study what sort of entities exist, what the world and its constituents are made of, and how objects or events might cause or explain each other. If you've ever wondered about God, wondered about the soul, wondered about the origins of the universe, that's kind of metaphysics. You can also break down that word, metaphysics, what is beyond physical. Meta meaning beyond, and physics meaning what's physical. So you're studying what is beyond the physical stuff. Another branch of metaphysics sometimes intersects with neuroscience, sort of what is a mind. Have you ever seen a thought? Are thoughts just parts of neurochemistry, electrical signals in the brain, or are thoughts something else? Because robots might have electrical signals in their, I don't know, motherboard, but do they have thoughts the same way we do, for instance? But anyways, that's metaphysics. We'll get a little bit into that around the end of the course. Epistemology. Epistemologists, you might have noticed the trend now, metaphysics, epistemology. Philosophers sometimes use very big and fancy words for I'm not entirely sure why they use these words, but they can come off as a little off-putting at times. Don't get intimidated by them. They actually mean something quite simple. So while metaphysics means the study of what's beyond physics, epistemology is the study of what we can know. So here I have on the slide, they study knowledge, evidence, and justified belief. An epistemologist might study whether we can trust our senses and whether science is trustworthy. So if you have ever had a dream and you couldn't tell whether you were actually dreaming or you were in real life, that might be an instance of epistemology in action. How could you tell that it was not actually a dream? A part of epistemology that intersects with social philosophy, for instance, if you've ever been gaslit, and if you don't know what gaslighting is, go ahead and look that up. But if you've ever been gaslit or if you've ever been accused of gaslighting someone, the idea of gaslighting is an epistemological concept. So, philosophers or critical thinkers, epistemologists, came up with that idea. Finally, we have finally here on the list, we have values or value theory. Value theory in its broadest is, what people value. In other words, the philosophers study morality, politics, and art, among other topics. What makes them valuable? For example, what makes more wrong actions wrong or right actions right? How to identify good people in good life or bad people in bad lives? And what makes society just or unjust? Value theory, particularly ethics, is actually my specialty. So we're actually going to go ahead and start off in this course you're going to see with ethics and then applied ethics. Ethics itself can be very theoretical and very broad, while applied ethics usually looks at very specific topics. So you might be saying at this point, okay, cool, you've told me a little bit about philosophy, but what is the point of all this? Again, if you're optimistic, to discover truth wherever and whatever it is, to learn how to better live our lives, to understand our own views, including their strengths and weaknesses. And that's actually what I would emphasize myself. My goal as an instructor is that for you folks, by the end of this class, you learn something interesting about yourself and your beliefs. So then you can stand up for those beliefs when you talk and interact with other people. Because if you don't know what your beliefs are, then you can't really stand up for them. You can't really stand up for anything, right? What does Metcalf tell us as well? To examine our own lives and be more conscious of our choices and their implications, to learn how to better think and reason. Recall the main method of philosophy is to present and examine arguments. There is also a class called critical thinking, which is specifically aimed at this goal. And again, what will we do in this course? Again, we're going to go ahead and begin by studying ethical theories, value theory. Then we're going to go into applied ethics. I haven't fully committed yet, but I think the issues we're going to be looking at in applied ethics are going to be reparations, euthanasia, and abortion. I think those are all timely topics and important topics today. After that, we'll look at epistemology and then finally metaphysics at the end of the course. Okay, our next slide deals with Rachel's already. We're going to hold that off until the next recorded lecture. But with that said, there's the end of this recorded lecture. I'll see you folks next time. Bye-bye.